Good morning, everyone. I just want to introduce myself before we get started with the discussion. I lead the HR consulting practice at BPM, as Mo mentioned. Our team supports all types of businesses and nonprofits, from small to large, enterprise entities, from complete outsource of HR to consulting work with building cultures and creating teams and strategic initiatives across the board. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about managing from a people standpoint, the remote workforce. I'm going to give you some tips and some very tactical thoughts to help you really rethink how we manage people in this time. So welcome to our pandemic, right? And how we, in this very, very unique time, support our people. And what I'm going to talk about today is I'm really going to give you a spectrum of things to think about in terms of practices and policies, but also very importantly around management and good management at this time, this unique time. Just a thought before I get started into the meat of this is, that if remote managing of people is really done well, it can be a game changer. And knowing that this environment is here to stay to some degree, probably less than it is today, but to some degree, it's really important to get it right. And so what does that look like? So let's jump in. First and foremost, it's about people first. So what does that mean? Well, people have intense anxiety, stress, are feeling lonely. It's so interesting when you get on video conferences and you just know that behind the faces, there's situations where people are dealing with parents, children are home, need to be attended to, this anxiety level of needing to engage with other people if you're alone in your apartment or your home. There's a lot going on for people right now, and you have to maintain that thought of people first. What does that mean? Well, so for an example of that, it's important to, and sorry, there's of course somebody mowing grass now that I'm getting started here, so I apologize for the background noise. It's important to allow people to talk about connection first. So we start all our meetings saying connection before content. So what's on people's minds? Allow people to talk about what is important to them right now, what they're dealing with. Give them an opportunity to connect. Along those same lines, we really want people to feel healthy, right? And engaged. We want people to be getting up and to be exercising, both mentally and physically. So on a mental standpoint, we really encourage the expanded EAP programs, so employee assistance programs through your broker, your benefit broker. This is an opportunity for people to connect one-on-one with therapists. And, it may be included in your plan, your benefit plan. It may not. You may have to pay separately for it, but it's something to check out and to think about. It's a nice addition for employees to have that. And then exercise. We all need to get up and move our legs, our bodies, keep our brains working and crisp, and on top of it, we need to move. I know I'm sitting all day long. I have to get up and remember to move around. And so let's just switch to this next slide real quick. And here is a list of opportunities for people to get yoga or participate in different classes, whether that's aerobic or stretching, meditation. So this list is one I just wanted you to have available, and we will be distributing content after this session so that you can download this, make this available to your employees. Okay, So next up, what practices should you be thinking about in terms of dealing with remote workers? So as I mentioned earlier, the aspect around people feeling like they need support, whether that's mental, whether that's connectedness with other people, really want to encourage the visual connectedness. So if there is opportunity and bandwidth with your network to do video conferencing, I highly, highly recommend that as much as possible to allow people to see each other, to connect through this visual content. I know some companies don't have that kind of bandwidth, but if there is that opportunity, you want to encourage meetings to be visual meetings. You get that social clue through those video conferencing, and it's key when really doing brainstorming and complex ideas. In addition, you want to give people the opportunity to have some kind of norms, some kind of rituals. Maybe set up an opportunity to have water cooler visits in chat sessions, or a happy hour with families where people's creative talents can show through. Maybe you have a pianist on your team. Allow those people to show their individual strengths. Again, a time unlike any other where if we can bring that additional interpersonal connectedness through our work, all the better. And it's an opportunity to get to know people at another level. So try to establish some kind of norms to ensure that people are getting that connectedness. And in addition to that, in this next section on communicating, I want to just highlight that when you're communicating, whether it's video conferencing, whether it's email, whether it's phone calls, maybe you're on Slack, think about and maybe suggest this to employees that we have our norms around. If you're dealing with a complex issue, get on a video conference. If your communication is not urgent, maybe it's a small matter, email is fine. If there's a miscommunication, get on the phone or get on a video conference. So it's maybe something that you as a leader or HR wants to communicate that as a norm throughout the organization, that this is our practice. If you're based on that kind of communication, we're going to communicate in certain ways. Okay, more about communication. So how and when do I communicate with my remote team? So first and foremost, you want to communicate more often than you have in the past. We need that. So I recommend weekly touch calls, whether that's with direct reports, whether that's teams connecting. Try to make those more frequent. And help employees to maintain boundaries with their work. I'm sure you've noticed that there's this continuum now. People are starting to communicate through the weekends. Conference calls are on Sunday. I really want to encourage that you keep those boundaries through Monday through Friday, maybe even delay sending emails so that it's during work hours, so that there's that line between weekend and work week. Encourage also company-led check-ins. Leadership should try to be checking in with employees more often. Understand where the company is going, even though there's a lot of unknowns during this time. Really want to suggest that those communications happen more often. Policies, whether we want to change remote policies now, whether we want to add policies now, during this initial sort of getting used to the crisis, we were not encouraging changing policies. I think there is this aspect of expenses. So this will probably come up in the next two sections, but employees are now using equipment at home, and there may be an added expense for employees, and it's important to be sensitive to that added expense for employees while we may be furloughing or reducing hours. And so if the money is there and there's an opportunity to make really clear that coverage is there, I encourage that to get communicated. So again, if the funds are there, then let people know that maybe you're going to offer a flat rate for coverage of cell phones, for coverage of printer inkjet, the ink or paper, or maybe they need a printer. Generally, those items need to be covered by the company. There's these issues right now. We have a client that just is not in a position to cover those kind of equipment costs. And I think probably the IRS is going to turn their head during this unique time. But in general, if you can cover those kind of expenses, we're encouraging, rather than having people itemize each one, maybe cover a flat rate, although either is acceptable. And then make sure you're offering timekeeping. Not offering, but make sure that you're addressing timekeeping policies around non-exempt versus exempt, and make sure that they're clear. People should still be taking their breaks and lunches if they're non-exempt, and making sure they're tracking that time, etc. Okay, going on to the next slide. So I can talk about this content on this slide for the next hour. So I'm just going to give you a quick and dirty, and just FYI, I am talking about this content in an hour presentation on the 29th that is being scheduled through Eventbrite. It's focused for nonprofits, but certainly anyone can attend. And you know, managing remote people right now is considered good management if it's done appropriately. And the keys to this are to ensure that you're having ongoing conversations between managers and employees. So like I said earlier, employees need that connectedness. They need to have that opportunity to know how they're doing, to be clear on what they're doing. And so those one-on-ones are key. So having a structure to do that and making sure that there's regular scheduled time for those one-on-one check-ins are very important. What else is important for good management? Well, so are people clear on the work they're doing? Are they owning the work they're doing, or are they being told that they have to do that work? So there's some nuances there, right? People should be feeling a part of owning the work that they have. Managers might feel a need to do some micromanaging now because they don't really know what employees are working on, since they're not in front of them and they're not having that face-to-face contact. I encourage that not happen, right? That micromanagement, as much as that tendency I think is there, you want to resist that. So if you don't micromanage, how do you know the work's getting done? How do you know that people are being accountable for what they're doing? Well, I really suggest that there's an opportunity to put practices in place around performance conversations, around setting clear goals for people. And not just clear goals, but measurable goals. So that's a key component during this time, is to ensure that employees understand what they're responsible for, but also have measurement criteria so they know when they're doing well, and the supervisor knows when they're doing well, so the supervisor doesn't feel like they have to micromanage the employee. So put tools in place. Put performance management tools in place, and maybe strategic management tools in place where goals are aligned to the strategy and the initiatives that the organization has. There's a tool that we use called 2020 Insights. The product's called Insights. The website is 2020insights.net. I don't want to be in a position where I'm selling anything here, but it's what we use. And it keeps that connectedness and that ability to see where the organization is in terms of initiatives and where we're going as in a company, but also connecting people to the work that they're doing and the organization initiatives as a whole. And that also ensures people are getting regular feedback, which is so key. I think in terms of what can be talked about, right? You want to certainly honor sensitive information when you're doing video calls and give people the opportunity to talk about what might be private to them, but not set them up for those kind of questions in a way where they may be uncomfortable. So I think you want to ask open-ended questions and prompt people sharing, but not necessarily ask them to share private or sensitive information. And along those lines, be aware that in terms of coronavirus and who's getting sick, you should never name anyone who has the coronavirus in your company, or even identify families. You want to keep that private unless the person wants to share that information. They are certainly able to do that, but you don't want to share that kind of private information. So, other than that, it depends on the kind of environment that you have, whether it's totally transparency is sort of the norm, or you tend to be a more private company. Some companies share revenue numbers, some don't. I think it sort of depends on your culture. I can tell you for BPM, it's been an interesting time because our CEO sends out a daily email to everyone and shares a lot of personal information. And I think people really appreciate that connectedness with the CEO. But obviously, you have to have a comfort level with that to go to that level.